when you're trying to balance
Yes,
speed and quality and you're encountering spikes in demand or needs from a build
sure.
team, are methods like outsourcing or using engineering agencies effective for speed? And if so, what do early stage companies need to be aware of?
I get this question a lot. I think in an early stage startup, resourcing is challenged, right? The ability to hire in house, bring engineering teams in house, and do that quickly and nimbly can be tough. And so I definitely have leaned heavily, whether it's pre Series A, kind of in the early stage rounds, when you're building and growing your product, to lean pretty heavily on outsourcing. Now, I've had a lot of lessons learned, I will say, in terms of how you even think about what you want to outsource, how much of the team, the whole team, what you want to keep sort of close to you, if you're the first product leader or if you're the founder. And then what are those trade-offs, right? In terms of how you work with them, where they're located. Are they in the States? Are they not in the States? And how you deal with time zone. But it's something I really encourage people to think about more. I think sometimes when you're looking at building an app or your first product or the next version, you think about your IP and you think, well, we don't want to outsource that, right? We want to keep that all in house, but speed really matters. And agencies have developed a lot, offshoring has developed a lot, and especially to be a strategic product partner. And you can get the best of both worlds. But I do think some watch outs and things to think about, depending on what phase you're at, is location really matters, and time zones, depending. I'm in a company right now where we have teams spread all over, and that has been an interesting challenge for us, and we're continually reorganizing ourselves, but we're a little further along. But I think in early stage startups, when you think about getting some engineering delivery teams, QA, infrastructure, whatever it is, right, to power your development. Also look for agencies that give either, if you have a head of engineering or your agency is going to be your head of engineering. My scenario was I had a head of engineering in the US. I hired an agency out of Romania, but what they brought, which I thought was unique, and I would tell every startup to make sure you get this if you're going to outsource, is essentially a lead that worked with my head of engineering to manage our multiple pods and delivery teams, because he was very close to their talents, their skills, their capabilities, and became kind of this lifeline for us. I rarely see it. I look for it now every time I'm looking for an agency or a partner to extend my development teams. And I really, I think the quality thing is just around, your trust and sort of how you set up, right, that structure and what you're building. I don't think, you can assume just because you're outsourcing, and really these are more fractional teams. I think of them as employees, not just outsourcing. They should be thought of as your teams. And so I highly encourage it. I think there's a lot of watch outs and things to consider, but it can be extremely helpful in moving quickly, not having to go through the rounds of hiring. It's a very competitive marketplace to find the right types of talent. So your first engineer, and you need to have sometimes changes in skills and capabilities, and you need to do it quickly, and partners can help you do that.
I'd love to double click on your experience with the agency that you worked with from Romania. And you
Sure.
mentioned that they brought a lead in, and that was something that you hadn't seen before.
Yeah.
For startups that maybe haven't worked with agencies or done outsourcing before, could you explain a little bit about what the status quo that you've usually seen and what was particularly special
Yeah.
about working with this agency?
Yeah, no, great question. I think the norm has been and let's use a real scenario. So I was in a smaller stage company where we had one senior developer, right? Not your head of engineering. We were looking to extend our engineering resources with a partner. Now, the traditional model would be to just work with an agency that places somebody with you, and then you're just responsible for everything, right? In terms of, it's more just talent hiring through an agency. It's not really a development team that is thinking about embedding in your product structure and engineering structure and having joint accountability for those outcomes. That's what I wanted, right? That's what I wanted, not necessarily people that were kind of fractional workers that we then had to manage. And then anytime we went to switch something, we had to work with the agency to switch things out. I wanted a much more embedded, integrated team. And that's a strategy now for more, I think, product-led engineering organizations that are agencies that go, hey, we understand you as a CPO or head of product or founder. We get what you need and want, versus just people, right? And so it comes with a framework, and it comes with someone that can help be your partner with that versus just, talent sourcing, so to speak, person by person. And that's where I think the space is, and that has a place in time. Don't get me wrong, that has a place in time. And when you're building something for the first time, or you have, hypotheses, experiments, risk, maybe it's for a B2B customer, you want to make sure you have a partner with you that's like, on the boat.
I really like what you said about really embedding that dev team and having that joint accountability. I completely agree that it's really, really helpful, especially at the early stage. I'd love to look at the
Yeah.
differences in how you think about working with agencies and outsourcing, how you think about this speed quality trade off when you're working on B2B versus B2C.
I'd say the last 10 years I've been in businesses that in edtech, that have started in B2C and gone to B2B, have pivoted out of B2B and back into B2B, or have been in B2B and considered going B2C and experimented. So I've been in kind of both and seen the world where you have one singular market and space kind of in B2B, and you don't have the distractions necessarily. And in my current company, I have both, right? We're managing both. And so it's very nuanced and different. So in a B2B world, especially early stage, if you're starting B2B or if you're in B2C and you're considering a pivot into B2B, B2B are longer sales cycles. If you're looking for that first or second customer, right? It's not necessarily like B2C where it's very iterative. It could be much more on growth product sort of capabilities, right? Where you're looking to convert, more on funnel, more things up front, potentially just a different life cycle and much more iterative, and also on the product experience as well. You're getting constant user feedback. And with B2B, they're buying and have expectations and requests and problems that they believe you're going to be solving for them, and will hold a higher bar to quality necessarily because it's their reputation, right? And so if you have a first pilot or it's your first 2 to 4 logos, right, that you're bringing on board, your road mapping can look very different, right? In terms of thinking ahead around what the problems are you want to solve. How are you communicating that back and with maybe your pilot customers? Do they even understand they're the first pilot customers? That's usually always one of the things that I advise, to be as transparent as possible and treat them as partners, or even get them to be engaged like that, right? So that they can be part of the feedback cycle and not create, which can be, and I've seen this both ways, where our first enterprise client can really weigh down and drown your level of being able to innovate, because the requests, maybe the things that they're thinking about, aren't the problems that you want to solve in your vision. And so you have to navigate that really carefully, right? In terms of what do we just keep building, for them, and what's repeatable, maybe for the sales cycle or the value proposition for your head of sales or your GM or whoever's tasked, right, with starting to build that business, or your founder, if it's just your founder out there getting the next deals. So very different cycles, and very different ways of managing. And I'd even say on the B2B side, what I've seen and experienced, I came into a company where 100% was B2C and experimenting and thinking about going to B2B. And what wasn't seen and sort of known was that the B2C requests were kind of going direct into engineering, right? It was just this rapid cycle, and there was almost minimal focus on product development, which was kind of ironic. It was more on like growth and funnel and tech stack and all of those things, which was important. But we needed to maintain that agility, but also leave room for building customer value in your product, right? And growth in B2C can sometimes dominate into your roadmap, into customer value. And it seems almost counterintuitive, but both are really important, right? Building value for your customers and then also converting the customers. And that can create tension in your roadmap.